house was quiet, the way houses are only quiet right before something breaks. Light stood over his husband's bed at 2 in the morning with a gun in his hand, and no story ready if this went wrong, which was unlike him. He always had a story ready. That was the job. Now Damon slept the way he did everything else, like a man who had already accounted for every possible threat and simply chosen for now to let his guard rest. Broad shoulders, dark hair falling loose across his forehead. None of the careful control he wore like armor in daylight. Asleep, he looked less like the man 3 rival families were afraid of, and more like someone Light might have actually wanted in some other life, where wanting things was not a liability. Now Light told himself, do it now. While he cannot see your face, his finger found the trigger guard. His pulse did not even climb. Years of training had scraped that particular fear out of him a long time ago. Damon's eyes opened, not slow, not groggy, all at once the way trained men wake, and for 1/2 second, Light saw the real Damon underneath the husband. Sharp, assessing, dangerous. Light! Damon's voice was rough with sleep, and underneath the roughness, something Light had not planned for. Worry, not suspicion. What is wrong? There was no version of this where Light explained a loaded gun pointed at his husband's chest, so he did the only thing his instincts offered him in that half second. He closed the distance instead of running. He kissed him. Hard, fast. The gun still cold in his other hand, angled down and away now, forgotten between one heartbeat and the next. Damon made a low sound of surprise against his mouth, and then infuriatingly predictably kissed him back, like he had all the time in the world, like there was not a weapon 3 inches from his ribs. When Light finally pulled back breathless in a way he refused to examine, Damon's eyes went to the gun. Nightmare, Light said before he could ask. I heard something, old habits. It was not even a good lie. It was barely a lie at all, just enough truth wrapped around the part that mattered to make the whole thing swallowable. Enan Damon studied him a moment too long. Then slowly he reached out and closed his hand over Light's on the grip, easing it down, setting it on the nightstand like it was nothing more than a phone or a glass of water. You could have woken me, Damon said. You do not have to face things alone in this house. You have no idea what I came here to face, Light thought, and let his husband pull him back down into the dark, his heart going harder now than it had the whole time the gun was raised. The one place in the mansion that was entirely unapologetically Light's was a converted sunroom on the east wing. Mirrored walls, a sprung floor, natural light in the morning that turned the whole space gold. Damon had built it for him 3 months into the marriage. No occasion attached, just you mentioned you missed dancing. Light hated how much that gift still worked on him. He was mid-routine, the kind of movement that didn't ask permission from anyone. All momentum and old muscle memory when his phone buzzed against the speaker dock. A text from a number that changed every week. The window moved. 2 weeks, finish it or we finish it for you. Light stood very still in the mirror, chest heaving, sweat cooling on his skin, and watched his own face try to figure out what to do with that sentence. 2 weeks he'd been telling himself there was time. There had never been time. There had only ever been his father's patience running out slower than expected, and now even that was gone. He deleted the message the way he'd been trained, 3 taps, no trace, and looked up to steady himself in the mirror. Someone was standing in the doorway. Not Damon. The angle was wrong, the height wrong. Just a shape, gone before Light's eyes fully adjusted. Footsteps already fading down the east hall. He told himself it was a member of the household staff. He did not believe himself. 10 minutes earlier, Light had been locked in the second floor bathroom, running his split knuckles under water gone pink, gauze in his teeth, listening for footsteps in the hall like his life depended on it, because in a fairly literal sense it did. Now he was standing in the kitchen doorway watching his husband, the most feared man in 3 states, wearing a small apron with an embroidered cat on the front, dicing vegetables like a man with nothing to hide. You're doing that face again, Damon said, without looking up. What face? The one where you're deciding whether to make fun of me or not. I've already decided, Light said. I'm doing both, sequentially. Damon huffed something that was almost a laugh. He slid a plate across the counter. Eggs, done exactly the way Light liked them, which he'd never once had to ask for twice. Light's hand, reaching for the fork, caught the light wrong. Damon's gaze sharpened instantly. What happened to your hand? 4 seconds. That was how long Light had to build a lie, and he'd built worse ones in less time. Cabinet door, in the dance room. I wasn't paying attention. You're always paying attention, Damon said. It's one of the things He stopped himself, and for once it was Damon who looked like he'd said too much. One of the things you... What? Nothing. Damon turned back to the stove, ears faintly, satisfyingly red. Eat your eggs. Light looked down at his knuckles, half healed under fresh gauze, and thought, this is the part where a smarter man would leave. He ate the eggs instead. The gala was the kind of event where everyone smiled with their teeth and meant nothing by it, which usually suited Light fine. Tonight, it meant he had exactly 9 minutes to deal with 3 men sent to test whether red had gone soft, and then walk back inside smiling like nothing had happened. He did it in the parking garage 2 levels down, in a tailored jacket he was absolutely going to have to replace, moving in the clean, economical way no dance instructor had ever taught him. It was fast. It was quiet. It was, by his own private standards, sloppy because some part of his brain kept counting down the minutes until Damon would notice he was gone. He was fixing his collar in the elevator mirror, breathing back to normal, hair damp at the temples. When the door opened on the ground floor and Alexander was standing there, Alexander's gaze went from Light's flushed face to his slightly torn cuff to the healing knuckles from 3 days ago, and something in his expression sharpened into a smile that had nothing charming left in it. Long night? Alexander asked. Traffic, Light said. In the parking garage. It's a very confusing garage. Alexander stepped in beside him, close enough that his voice dropped to something only Light could hear. You move like someone I used to know, he said. Someone with a different name. Light's pulse didn't spike. Years of training. But something colder than fear settled low in his stomach. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Alexander's smile widened, unhurried. Delighted. Sure you don't, Red. Alexander found him again near the coat check, out of earshot of the party, and didn't waste time being subtle about it. I'm not going to tell your husband, he said. Not yet. Not for free. What do you want? An introduction. Somewhere close. Somewhere Damon trusts you enough to bring a +1 no one questions. Alexander's eyes glittered with something that wasn't quite malice, more like a man enjoying a game he thought he'd already won. You get me into a room I can't get into on my own, and your secret stays exactly where it is. Light kept his face perfectly still, the way he'd been trained to since he was 9 years old. And if I say no, then Dark Damon finds out he married an assassin sent by the Vale family, Alexander said pleasantly. And I get to watch what happens to that pretty domestic little life you've built. Light thought of the eggs, the cat apron, the gun set gently on the nightstand like it was nothing to be afraid of. Fine, he said, and hated how much it cost him. He didn't yet understand that the room Alexander wanted access to was Damon's private security office, or that saying yes had just made him complicit in exactly the kind of betrayal he was supposed to be committing anyway. Damon's private office was the one room in the house Light had never been invited into and had, until tonight, never needed to enter. He was 3 drawers deep, moving fast, gloved, methodical, looking for whatever Alexander actually wanted, and telling himself this still counted as reconnaissance and not betrayal when the door opened behind him. Looking for something. Adrian stood in the doorway, arms crossed, tone carefully, deliberately mild. Light didn't flinch. Flinching was for people who hadn't already built the lie in advance. Damon asked me to grab a folder for the Whitmore account, he said smoothly. He's terrible at describing where he leaves things. He usually asks me for that. He asked me tonight. Light held Adrian's gaze. Easy, unbothered. A man with absolutely nothing to hide. Feel free to check with him. I'll wait. Adrian didn't move for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, let Light pass with the folder, an actual folder, the Whitmore one, grabbed it random and correct by pure luck, and said nothing else. But his eyes followed Light all the way down the hall. Later that night, alone in his study, Adrian would open a fresh page in a notebook he kept for exactly this purpose, and write a single line. Light dance room, Whitmore folder, hands too steady, watch. The job came in at 11 at night. A name, a location, a deadline that could not move again. Light went out the east wall the way he always did, dressed in black, moving like something the dark had made room for. He found his target in the garden behind the greenhouse. A shape crouched near the security panel and had a blade half drawn before the shape spoke. Light! He froze. The voice cracked something open in his chest before his mind caught up to why. Vincent! His brother stepped into the thin moonlight, hands raised, not in surrender, but in the old signal they'd used as children. Don't. It's me. It's really me. Older, harder around the eyes than Light remembered, dressed like he belonged to Damon's world instead of their father's. You almost took my head off, Vincent said low. You were in the dark outside my husband's house at 11 at night, Light hissed. What did you expect? I expected you, Vincent said, which is exactly the problem. It took Light a full 10 seconds to understand what his brother meant, that Vincent wasn't visiting, that the careful, competent security consultant Damon had brought on 8 months ago, the one Adrian trusted, the one who'd been in and out of this house half a dozen times without Light ever once recognizing him in daylight. You've been here, Light said, this whole time. Working for him, Vincent said. Reporting to father, same as you. A pause, heavier than it should have been. We really are the same kind of disaster, aren't we? They talked in the greenhouse, low and fast, glass walls fogging with their breath. Father's not waiting for you anymore, Vincent said. He's done waiting. If you don't finish this in 2 weeks, he moves on Damon directly. No patience left, no plausible deniability required. I need more time. There is no more time. That's the entire message. Vincent's jaw tightened. You think you're protecting him by stalling? You're not. You're just choosing how he dies slow by your hand or fast by someone else's who won't care that you married him. Light's throat worked around nothing. I'm not going to kill him. Then you'd better find a third option, Vincent said, because those are the only 2 fathers offering. Somewhere in the main house, faint through the glass, a light clicked on. Damon, probably unable to sleep, wandering downstairs the way he did most nights now, ever since Light had started disappearing into his own head more than he used to. Vincent followed his brother's gaze toward the light. Something almost gentle crossed his face. You actually like him, he said. like the realization cost him something. God help you, Light. You actually do. The formal dinner ran 3 hours, and for 2 of them, Light bled quietly under a black silk dress shirt that hid it almost well enough. It should have been Damon. The shot came from the tree line during the after-dinner walk through the garden, aimed clean at the back of Damon's head, and Light had crossed the distance and taken the graze to his own shoulder before conscious thought caught up to instinct. "It's nothing," he said, before Damon could finish turning around, voice perfectly level even as heat spread down his arm. "Branch. Caught my sleeve on a branch. That's not..." Damon's eyes went to the dark spreading under Light's jacket, and something in his face went very still. "Light, I'm fine." He was not fine. He was counting his own pulse to keep it from spiking, holding his husband's gaze with the specific, practiced blankness of a man who had learned to smile through worse. "Let's finish the toast. People are watching." Damon didn't believe him. Light could see that much, but Damon also didn't push. Not there. Not in front of 40 guests who could not know their host had just been shot at. He simply moved his hand to the small of Light's back, steering him gently, protectively toward the house, and said nothing at all. It was the not pushing that undid Light more than the wound did. He'd built his whole life on being unreadable. His husband had just chosen, deliberately, not to read him, and it felt less like being fooled and more like being trusted, which was so much worse. "There was someone before you," Damon said one evening, out of nowhere, turning a glass of wine slowly in his hand. "Years ago, before the business took over everything." "Should I be worried?" Light asked. Light? Easy? The way he'd learned to ask questions he was actually afraid of the answer to? "No." Damon's mouth curved. "He wasn't like you. Nobody's like me." "No," Damon agreed, quieter now, watching him in a way that made Light's pulse do something complicated. "He never made me feel like I had to keep up." Light should have been relieved. Instead, something cold moved through him. Not jealousy of a ghost from Damon's past, but the much sharper fear that anyone digging into before, Damon's before, his own before, might turn over the wrong stone and find red standing underneath it. "Careful," Light said, setting his own glass down. "Talking about old flames tends to end badly for people in our line of work." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Damon studied him for a long moment, something searching in it, something that made Light's carefully built composure feel suddenly very thin. And then he closed the distance between them himself, unhurried, deliberate, and said against Light's mouth, "You're the only one I've ever wanted to keep up with." Light didn't remember deciding to kiss him back first. He only remembered that this time, unlike the gun, unlike the lies, there was nothing to explain away, just want, plain and unguarded, the first time he'd let it show without a reason attached.